Hey, Braden, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well, Dr. Keener. Listen, we're already a handful of episodes in to Mentor Moments, and we just want to take this time to thank our guests and our listeners for continuing to tune in and listen to us and also the awesome guests that we have every single episode and just continuing to support us.
Right on. We couldn't be more happy with the success we've had. And just a reminder, Mentor Moments is a collaboration between the Missouri Rehab Association Eastern Chapter and Maryville University's Rehabilitation Counseling Program. We'd like you to stay tuned for another episode of Mentor Moments.
It's not so much about the podcast being the nation's voice, it's about the stories of people with disability who have reached unprecedented levels of success. They've distinguished themselves.
On today's episode of Mentor Moments, we have Richard Sizemore and Betsy Civilette with us today. Richard is the media specialist at the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, and Betsy is the communication manager for the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services as well.
Betsy and Richard are also the co-hosts of the VR Workforce Studio podcast, and we're happy to have them on Mentor Moments.
Well, Betsy and Rick, we want to thank you again for taking this time to join us here on Mentor Moments. We'd love to just kind of kick it off and hear just a little bit about yourselves, what you guys are doing now, what you have recently been doing, and just a little bit about your careers.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this exciting outreach through Maryville University's Mentor Moments podcast. This is so exciting to see VR podcasts evolving in our vocational rehabilitation community.
Well, we certainly bring greetings from the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. I know we've been in touch with so many podcasters over the past 7 years who use podcasting as a way to share their message. And it was a huge deal for us to have your Dr. Keener on our show recently.
That was incredibly cool. We believe podcasting offers vocational rehabilitation a very unique opportunity. We've used it to build our relationship with our clients, with business and industry, and our communities. And we've created some very powerful connections with our national audience through this outreach. Let me start by talking a little bit about the co-host of the VR Workforce Studio, Betsy Civilette. She's our communications director for the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. Betsy joined us back in 2012, and she absolutely drives the marketing and public relations efforts in our DARS communications office, and we do use that shortened down acronym DARS for Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services. She promotes the agency, its overall mission, public awareness, and the work we do assisting people with disabilities, and in our case, older Virginians as well. Betsy also supports the agency's business and workforce development programs across Virginia, which is the way we reach out and engage business in our VR program. She creates content, manages our social media, our websites. She is a graphic designer, an independent communications consultant. She has a master's degree in journalism from Ohio University, a bachelor's degree in corporate communications from Ithaca College. Betsy is a top pro, and it has been a real joy to work with her over the past several years and to welcome her as the co-host for this podcast.
Well, thank you, Rick. Now, Rick Sizemore has had an extremely successful 33-year career in vocational rehabilitation. He has actually earned both state and National Rehabilitation Association Leadership Awards in his final year as a VR executive. And of course, now I have the great privilege of having Rick on my DARS communication team after he retired as a VR executive. And he is the host of VR Workforce Studio podcast. He created this nearly 7 years ago. Rick also holds degrees in music, radio, TV broadcasting, and business. And Rick and I, we make a great team, I believe. We work, we have our morning meetings to review our plan of the day and all the cool stuff that we have going on at DARS.
Man, that's awesome to hear. I think that just speaks to the varied backgrounds that individuals have that also find their way to rehabilitation counseling, and that we value everybody. So obviously there's the vocational focus when you're a rehabilitation counselor, vocational rehabilitation counselor, and we need people with varied backgrounds to help give us a more fulfilled workforce. Something else you said that I wanted to kind of just comment too, just the multiple connections you've made with your podcast. And I know we're relatively new, but just seeing sort of the social media reactions we've gotten, some of the people we've had, like their family members have been commenting and they're so proud of their family members being part of the show. And again, sort of that grassroots efforts of, again, spreading the good word of all of vocational rehabilitation counseling. So again, thank you for joining us and for the good work that you do.
Well, thanks. You'd ask us to talk a little bit about things that people might not know about us that have helped us in our careers. And we've certainly, as you said, come from some varied backgrounds and wound up in VR.
Well, let me get the ball rolling here, Rick, and brag about you. Rick started as a therapist and a music publisher, owned and operated recording studios, published music, and worked as a radio announcer before getting into VR. And he's an extremely talented musician as well.
Well, thank you, Betsy. That was a few years ago, but back in my earlier days, I was really on a dual career track and spent a lot of time learning my way around recording studios in the broadcast environment. And at a certain point, I got away from that type of work after I was in voc rehab a few years and trying to do both. But then it was around 2010, I realized that I had some skill sets that I could put to good use helping tell the VR story. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in the podcast. But Betsy is a professional journalist, one of the best photographers on earth. She is a sensational editor. She's taught me that, yes, Rick, you can say it with less words. And she's a great interviewer. I love to listen to her interviews. That list goes on, but if you want to talk about things that maybe people don't know about her that helps her in her career, is she's really a teacher.
Well, I'm a teacher at heart. My mother was a teacher and my mentor and role model. And so many teachers in all of our lives are true mentors. So for me personally, I taught at Sunday school for several years and volunteered in my children's classrooms. And just, that experience taught me many things. Anyone who's worked with children knows you have to be very creative to capture and keep their attention. And so I taught drama and computer in the classrooms at church, two of my interests. So I learned this helped me to be a better trainer at work because of the preparation required, to teach, and to also be more patient with teaching people things, especially when you're teaching computer skills, right, Rich?
That's right. I haven't got a new computer this week and had to go to Google to find the on button. My 17-year-old daughter laughed hysterically. But something Betsy did not tell you about her is you can find her as one of the personalities in a very popular band in Richmond. She is a singer and, again, multi-talented.
And Rick is as well. He's a craftsman. He makes his own dulcimers out of native Virginia spruce wood. So
that's right. Doesn't help much in VR, but I do love doing that.
Look, I just think it speaks to, the creativity that we have and how that helps us maybe look at situations in new and innovative ways, especially when we're working with clients.
Yeah. Well, you'd ask us, actually gave us the opportunity, and you better be careful giving Betsy and me the opportunity to promote what we're involved in, because we love to talk about the podcast. Betsy, you want to give us a little, maybe take us back to how we got started?
Yeah, let me go back to the beginning. It was really just a simple outreach of messaging. Back in 2015, Rick was sending out a monthly report to about 200 VR counselors, and professionals, and jokingly made a comment about it being a podcast. And his admin at the time said, well, you used to be a radio announcer. Why don't you record it? So on a whim, he literally went into his office, took out an MP3 dictaphone, and sat and read the report and attached the audio file to his monthly report, an email. And he was shocked that he started getting these email replies saying, wow, I listened to your report and didn't have to read it. And that was so cool.
Yeah, people love being able to just listen to it on the way home. And I'm sure you're getting that kind of feedback with the Mentor Moments. But it was about that time that I attended a conference with Steve Wooderson. Everyone in the VR community knows Steve Wooderson as the head of the Council of State Administrators of Vocational Rehabilitation. He has been a phenomenal supporter of me personally through the years and of this podcast. He was speaking in Richmond, and he opened the conference. I will never forget this. Part of his keynote, he said, folks, we're going to have to learn to tell our story. And I was driving back from that meeting, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, well, people may not want to hear another talking head podcast, but I'll bet if we interviewed some of the incredibly interesting people that we meet through vocational rehabilitation and let them tell their story in their own words, that might be something people would really be interested in listening to. And now with over 30,000 downloads, I am absolutely confident that this audience is interested in what people with disabilities have to say about vocational rehabilitation.
Yeah, I think that narrative piece coming from the people that that you're helping and the people that whose lives that you touch, that narrative piece would just be so powerful to hear. I can only imagine what that would be like. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'll give you some more background on what we're trying to do with our podcast. Our goals are we're connecting with businesses. We're sharing episodes that illustrate our VR clients' success stories. We're trying to remove the fear of hiring individuals with disabilities through these inspiring stories for our employers and potential employers, and have education and resources for our clients, businesses, families, and other VR professionals. And build that reputation of DARS to support, these phenomenal accomplishments of our consumers.
Yeah. Well, we've connected with a pretty significant audience. Of course, this is a Virginia podcast, but we have been able to form relationships with people like Maryville University. Certainly the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, Rehab Services Administration, National Rehabilitation Association, CSAVR, and in particular, the National Clearinghouse of Rehabilitation Training Materials. These are all partners, and we've connected with some pretty powerful business leaders. One is CVS Health. The other is Hershey, the Hershey Company. They've embraced the stories because they've hired people with disabilities to work in their operations. We'd love to share this one comment that we're so gratified by. We're so grateful to the Podcast Business Journal. And it may be something you want to start following through your Mentor Moments podcast. So the Podcast Business Journal did an article about us a couple years ago, and they had this to say about the podcast. The VR Workforce Studio over the past few years has become the nation's voice for vocational rehabilitation success stories through the powerful and compelling stories of disability employment. And what I love about it's not so much about the podcast being the nation's voice, it's about the stories of people with disability they've reached unprecedented levels of success. They've distinguished themselves. They are living better lives, and that's very gratifying. We have partners in universities, of course. George Washington University is right here close by. We're engaged with them. Many universities across the United States, but we've recently did a webinar for University of Wisconsin Stout, and that's in their Vocational Rehabilitation Institute. They have an online webinar. You can get CRC credit for that on how to use podcasting in vocational rehabilitation. So that's kind of some of the things that Betsy and I have talked about, and those partners like the National Clearinghouse are pretty important, aren't they, Betsy?
Yes, absolutely. And Rick interviewed their new director last month, Heather Service. And she, talking about mentors, your podcast being Mentor Moments. Heather said she is a collector of mentors because she seeks out people and wants to know who's the best at what they do and what can I learn from them. And I think that says a lot about like what your mission is too with Mentor Moments. And Rick has just forged so many relationships across the country in the VR community, like he said. So this has been crucial to the success of the podcast, because people spread the word. I think that's how Dr. Keener found us. Thanks to him, you now have your own podcast to spread the word. And there are other successful podcasts out there about the field of VR.
It's been exciting to see just how effective Dr. Keener has been, not only with this podcast, but the level of activity and outreach on Twitter and all the social media platforms. Really, you do the university proud, Dr. Keener. We're glad to be connected with you as you continue spreading that message of people with disabilities going to work.
You just said it right there. Work just means so much to each of us, sense of identity, fulfillment, independence, that it's and again, as you know, like the focus of working with businesses, right, to help better inclusion, right? So we have more people with disabilities, an untapped workforce. It's just like just hearing this, I'm tingling. I have tingles. So,
all right,
right. Again, just. You mentioned Steve Witterson. He's from Missouri. He's sort of a friend of the program. We're going to have him on, we're interviewing him in January. Not sure when he'll be airing. And maybe you know this or don't know this. So our state director, Tim Gaines, they were high school classmates of each other. So just think, two people in the same high school to get to the levels that they've had and the impact they've had on not only the state of Missouri, but all people with disabilities in our country. So. We're again pretty excited, to have this opportunity to get on a national audience.
They're powerful voices to have as cohorts.
Yeah, so I would love just to open up the time for you guys just to share a mentor moment with our listeners. Any students, any listeners that we have, we would love to hear any kind of tips that either of you would like to share at this time.
Well, Betsy, I think it's all about passion and some of those that we've engaged.
Absolutely. Rick, you've done some tremendous interviews. The Blue Man Group was a famous one that you did. The immortal Judy Heumann, who talks about Crip Camp. RSA Commissioner Carol Doback discusses why she is so passionate about VR and many other stories.
I guess the one thing that really has affected us and impacted us in a profound way is the national anthem for vocational rehabilitation. It features a fellow named George Dennehy, also the Voices of Rehabilitation Choir, which is a huge choir made up of exclusively of people with disabilities involved in vocational rehabilitation. And we were able to produce a music video. You can find that at vrworkforcestudio.com, episode 83. It was featured in the VR 100 webpage at RSA as they celebrated the 100th anniversary of vocational rehabilitation. And that song has opened the national conference now at CSA VR for the past 2 annual conferences. The song was originally penned by a fellow named Ralph Passanelli, who is an absolute legend in the VR community. And he entrusted us to update and re-release the song a couple of years ago. So the mentors don't always have to be older, but you can learn much from the clients that we work with. And the mentor I would hold out would be George Dennehy. He is an amazing singer and guitarist, even though he has no arms. He was born without arms, and he plays the guitar with his feet. He's performed on stage with acts like the Goo Goo Dolls. He is a motivational singer. He's a motivational he is a singer. He motivates people with his singing. He's also a motivational speaker, and he's amazing. Just a little bit about this anthem, if you've not heard it. Again, episode 83 at vrworkforcestudio.com. But the whole work we did with this anthem is to make it available for every VR agency or anyone who's interested in voc rehab. There's a free download of a karaoke soundtrack or the sheet music at episode 83 in the library in case someone locally would like to perform the song at an event or a meeting. But Betsy was there in the studio the day we went to Richmond, Virginia, went in and saw George record this song, and it was profound to see his level of forward thinking and creativity to perform that song in such an excellent way and sit there and play the guitar with his feet. I mean, Betsy, I had cold chills all over me just watching it.
He is amazing. And so, the lead on VR, so appropriate too, to reunite, that song to, after, I guess, when was it created, Rick, that song? I mean, it's been,
it was back around 2000 that Ralph Passanelli wrote it. And the words lead on, for those of you in academia who study Justin Dart, those were Justin Dart's words. Mm-hmm. Ralph Passanelli had to go see Yoshida, his widow, and she gave him the blessing to incorporate those words into the song Lead On VR. So again, we hope you'll take a time to go out to episode 83, download the episode, give it a listen. You'll get to hear the whole story. On that episode too is also Judy Heumann, as she talks about her experiences at Crip Camp. And we're just very thrilled to have been part of the energy and the excitement around that event, and to see how that one song has changed a nation's perspective on vocational rehabilitation through music. And we're grateful to you to have given us this opportunity to come on what's going to be a dynamic podcast and very popular as the years go by. And we appreciate the opportunity to have been involved today.
We've been very thankful for you to come on and share your words of wisdom. I'm sure this is going to be the highest rated episode, right? Well, I'll guarantee that now, right now, hands down, or you get your money back.
Well, Rick is a great mentor. I think, your listeners would be, well educated, but to reach out to him as well. Anything you want to know about VR podcasting or podcasting about VR.
Yeah. We'll be sure to include any links to your podcast as well, including the episodes that we talked about as well in this conversation. We want to thank you guys one more time for taking the time to join us, and we'll be looking forward to keeping in touch with you two.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, thank you so much.
So if you're listening to this, that means that you're listening to Mentor Moments. That means that you're probably listening on either Spotify or Apple Music, or maybe you're listening some other way. We just want to recommend that you continue to listen. Tune into some of our previous episodes and stay tuned. Subscribe to us because we'll have plenty more episodes coming your way as well.
In addition to the podcast, we have two other ways for you to stay connected with the Missouri Rehabilitation Association Eastern Chapter and Maryville University's Rehabilitation Counseling Program. We are proud to announce the creation of a YouTube channel and a blog. Both the blog and the YouTube channel will have all things related to the Missouri Rehab Association Eastern Chapter and Maryville University's Rehabilitation Counseling Program. Check us out.